Welcome to Talent Hub Talk. I'm Ben Duncan, and on this podcast, I will be interviewing prominent and inspirational figures from both the local ANZ and global Salesforce Ohana. Ben, welcome back.
Glad to be back, Ben. It's been a couple of years, I think.
Yeah, last time was when we first met in San Fran, so when the world was a bit more normal and we could travel and all those fun things.
There was John. Oh, who else was on that call with us? It was John Knight, Andrew, and Chris.
The legend that is Christopher Hopper.
Yeah, that was a while ago.
It was a good chat. So we've got some more to cover today, and I think we'll explore the world of admins again. I know you're passionate about the admin space and making things fair as well, and really truly understood. I think because there's a lot of kind of I guess disagreement in the market around what different levels are and what people can expect and why someone would hire someone senior or over junior and things like that. So yeah, I guess let's kick off with what's the difference between entry level and junior in your opinion?
In my opinion, an entry level, you're not looking for any experience. This is somebody who's coming in green, right? It's greenfield. They're here to learn. They're here to become an admin underneath you. Junior, I tend to loop them in with entry level roles, but it's 0 to 1 year experience. Anything in the Salesforce space over 1 year experience at this point, that's you're hitting that mid-tier level at that point. Like you expect to pay more, you expect them to be able to do more. If you're expecting experience, and I think that's Salesforce is still such a new technology that you can't do that.
So you know Nick, right, who's hiring for an admin at the moment. I know you saw he was looking entry level, and you were like, you know, that you got a buzz out of that because it was great to see people doing that, and you said you've got people to recommend. Like, what do you think? Like, what are the minimum, even entry level with no experience in Salesforce, but like, what are the skills or transferable skills that people can be looking for someone to bring into that kind of role? Like, is it literally a grad straight out of school, or are you looking for someone with a bit of life experience from a work perspective and, you know, certain soft skills?
Yeah, I don't think like I don't think a degree is necessary. I don't think a certificate is necessary. I think the ability to just communicate, to communicate directly, but also you have to be able to talk. And as I stumble over my own words here, you have to be able to hold a conversation with somebody. And if you can't hold a conversation, you'll never survive as an admin. I don't care how experienced you are, right? Especially at this entry level, because you're going to be following somebody and shadowing somebody. You have to know how to hold a conversation, ask questions, and receive feedback. And for me, when I'm hiring an entry level role and a junior level, so I hired someone actually a year in June, I'll have had an entry level person on my team, junior level person on my team. She had a ton of life. You know, she has a master's degree in English, but she had no Salesforce experience. But she could hold a conversation, and she was hungry to learn, and she was willing to ask questions. And for me, that goes a long way.
So what did she like? How did she stand out from others when you were hiring?
She was hungry. She approached me. She found me on TikTok. Actually, I was on TikTok. I was posting some Salesforce content, and she started following me, and she reached out just asking for advice. She found me on LinkedIn. She asked advice of like what she should do to approach people. And at the time I didn't have an open role, but as I opened one, and I mean, you saw Nick's post, a couple hundred people applied to that role. I had the same piece, the same experience when I heard my last junior role. You know, she stood out. She applied, she approached, she came to the table wanting and hungry to learn. And when she did ask questions, they weren't generic, like, hey, I'm interested. It was, this is what I'm trying to do, and this is what I'm trying to accomplish. How would you go about it? Yeah, it's interesting. Like I put a post up recently. I've seen a lot of companies struggling to hire admins at all levels. So senior, you kind of understand that, right? Because, you know, there aren't that many compared to how many opportunities there are. But we have seen a massive influx of people coming into the market at a junior level. So, you know, there are lots of people out there now with certifications, but no work experience. And there's one company that I'm working with at the moment. I've just started engaging with them, but it's they've had an open admin role since September last year, and they're hiring for an entry-level admin role. Like, they don't need any experience. They do want someone with a certification. I think just to show that someone's gone out and kind of what they don't want is someone that just decides this morning they want a Salesforce role and then they apply and they get it because, you know, they decided this morning. They want to see that someone's invested some time over a period of weeks or months, not 2 to 3 weeks, but we'll get onto that later on. But yeah, someone that's actually invested in a career in Salesforce, and that's why the certification is something they want to see.
But what they've really struggled with is finding someone that has empathy, someone that can, engage with the business. And it's interesting because I've been reviewing CVs recently for that role, and I'm seeing like a lot of people with no technical background, they've never coded in their life, they've never studied coding, but on their CV they'll have like knowledge of Lightning Web Components, right? And immediately I'm looking at their CV and that turns me away straight away because I'm like, that doesn't match what my client wants. Initially, it's someone that can communicate, can kind of take orders from the users. The fact that you have Lightning Web Components on your CV is going to put the client off because they're either going to think you're too senior, too much of a developer, not happy doing a first level support role. They're the kind of things you don't want to put on your CV, but I feel people think that they have to.
Yeah. Or they're going to think of, do they actually know what they're talking about because they have no experience, but they know LWCs? Like there's 3/4 of mid-tier admins don't know enough about Lightning Web Components to really talk about them.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you have hired, so the lady that you brought into the team recently, and you brought in at a junior level, what kind of what kind of roles and responsibilities can you throw at someone day one?
So on my side, it's triage. It's understanding the tickets. So they're responsible for reviewing the tickets and then triaging them out to the right stakeholder or business holder within business person within our company. So they come in, it's marketing, right? We talk to the marketing specialists on our team, marketing admin, the Salesforce marketing admin on our side here, and they get together, they review the ticket to understand what the request is, they triage it, and then they work it together. And she gets to learn from somebody who's experienced, but she's also the first line for us. So it's really getting to know the business through the questions they're asking.
So how do you then keep someone like that engaged as well and learning? Because I guess it's important to understand where they're going with their career because there is so much demand and expectation in the market. Like it must be important to give them like the next step as well and show them that you're learning and developing and not just purely focusing on helping other people solve a problem.
Yeah. So for us, I'm very fortunate that my tech stack is pretty stacked with Salesforce tools. So we're sales, service, CPQ, Experience Cloud. We run the gamut there. And so we're looking at all types of requests that are coming in. And then after the first month or two, after she's like kind of learned to understand the business, met the people, the stakeholders, she can start solutioning on her own. So it's like, hey, why don't you go solution this first? Then we'll come together and we'll review it. This is how we look at things. This is how our process works. And it's really about helping them help themselves. I don't have a requirement for certifications on my team, but I do expect them to be able to look at Trailhead and understand how super badges work and that kind of information and those kind of skills. But they're not always transferable. So it's yes, keep working on Trailhead, but also show me that you are learning by coming up with ideas because there's no bad ideas when it comes to Salesforce. I mean, there are. There are definitely bad ideas when it comes to Salesforce. But in this case, it's her trying to learn and them in junior roles and entry level professionals learning, so they can ask the questions. They have to not be afraid to ask the questions.
Yeah, 100%. Like I think it's really important when a company is hiring for a junior that they have someone like yourself in the team, someone that can actually guide. And because otherwise, like you said, there are bad ideas, there are bad ways of doing things, and if you don't know, you don't know.
Yep.
So Twitter today kind of blew up in the Salesforce world. There was a guy, I'm not sure who that was, but I
think he's related to a boot camp, like a boot camp company.
Okay. Oh, really? Okay, cool. Yeah. So that might explain it a bit more. But he basically said anyone with a bit of something about them, some general kind of smarts, could do an intense kind of 2 to 3 week program and become a Salesforce admin, get an entry level role, and the salaries are going to be high. And I think that there's a real issue in the market with, I think a lot of people have been sold that dream, a definite surplus at the moment of people that don't have any hands-on experience but have a certification and are looking to make that break. What was your take when you saw that tweet?
I mean, I giggled a lot. Like I was sitting on a plane. I was flying in from Austin this morning. I was sitting on the tarmac and I saw that and I was like, oh, this is awesome. This is exactly what people need to see. The problem with the Salesforce ecosystem right now and these boot camps and in general is there aren't junior roles. There aren't entry-level roles. And yes, existing skill sets and career transitions can help you get more experience and land you a more senior, quote unquote, senior level role. But it's far and few between. Like there are not a ton of people who are coming in from engineering into, a mid-level Salesforce role because a couple of reasons. One, most hiring managers don't have a ton of Salesforce experience, right? There are not a lot of actual technical Salesforce folks in hiring manager roles. First off, so they don't know what they're looking for when they see this. They just see, oh, great, there's a certification. But then on top of that, when you're saying it takes 2-3 weeks to get a certification, to your point, it doesn't take 2 to 3 weeks to get a certification. It's a lot harder than that. Maybe if you are, I think Mike Wheeler responded to that thread and said he thinks it can be done in 4 to 5 weeks with like full-time studying. And even then it's kind of a stretch. But certifications don't tell you anything. They just say you can pass a test. I personally don't use certifications as a standard in my hiring practices. I don't even look them up. If you have certifications on your resume and you apply for my open roles, I don't even look to see if they're real certifications. I'm more interested in like super badges and those more technical experience side things. Like if you come up and you say you have 12 super badges or however many there are right now, that's more impressive to me than the certification. And it's because we're running into these situations where there are thousands of people out there who went and got the certification, and now they're just pounding down every door they can get on to see if there's a role for them. Yeah. It's diluted the market for it.
Like I was recruited, so I typically recruit for roles in Australia and New Zealand, but recently I was recruiting for a role in another country. I was engaging people about this role, and there were, people that had multiple certs, and I'd jump on a Zoom call with them and I'd ask them a basic question, and all of a sudden their Zoom would go down. Their internet connection kind of gone funny when they couldn't answer a question, or where there was something like really basic, or even just to ask them where they've worked with a certain product and stuff, and why that business. So why would a bank use CPQ as an example? Could they tell me what the use case for that was in their business? And they just couldn't do it, but they had all these certs, right? And I think that's the problem is I think people have been led to believe that if you get certs, then you'll get a job. And also there are these cert factories, right, where you can just get a cert because you can get a cert. I think
was it 2 years ago? Was that race to the CTA or something like that? Everybody was trying to get as many certifications as they could. That to me is a great example of why certifications aren't a great judge of experience and talent in the ecosystem. Because there's not a single admin out there, dev or declarative side, who has access to every single tool that certifications exist for. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? There's nobody has access to all that unless maybe they work for Salesforce.
Yeah.
But that tells me like you're not using the tool daily. You're not hands-on with it on a regular enough cadence to actually master it and be able to speak to what it's capable of. And that's what we're seeing with a lot of entry-level people coming into the Salesforce space. And it's not a bad thing. I'm all about bringing entry green level talent into the ecosystem, but we have to do it the right way. And we have to do it in a skill set and experience appropriate roles. It's true roles designed to help bring somebody up and train them and teach them. It's not, hey, I have a certification, I can do this.
Yeah, I think that's the key is like if you're going to hire juniors or entry level, you have to have a plan, you have to have structure and support for them. What's your view then on partners now? Because I had a guy, I placed him multiple times. He started an engagement recently through me, and it's the second time he started a contract through me where he's picking up the mesh from exactly the same Salesforce partner. And it must, obviously there's a lot of demand in the market. People are hiring, partners are struggling to get resources. But because a lot of companies will look at a partner and go, well, they've got X amount of certifications. They're going to put this person on a project who has X amount of certifications. Like, surely we're in safe hands. So who's to blame them when a project goes bad or when a company gets left in a bit of a mess because they've hired a partner that didn't necessarily have the resources that they were expecting them to have?
I think you can see because Salesforce has approached this, is addressing this, right? It used to be how many certifications does a partner have? Now Salesforce is looking for a higher, they want to see more people with certifications versus one person has 15. They rather see 15 people with one certification because they know there's an issue with resourcing. They know there's an issue with projects coming in unfinished, partially done, bad workmanship, and they're trying to stop that. To your point, though, partners are going straight to the fount right now. They're going straight to new graduates and trying to teach them themselves. The problem is, unless you're one of the larger partners out there, you don't have a really great foundational base for training and teaching new admins and new consultants, right? Salesforce consulting is not like Big Four consulting. It's a whole different world. It's a whole different methodology. It's a lot of hands-on work where like management consultants and traditional consulting is not them doing the work. They're coming in, leading the project, maybe doing a little bit of strategy. They're not actually the one also going out and building, which is what you see from a lot of Salesforce firms. So it's new grads, not a ton of experience in the world in general, but then on top of that, not a ton of experience in Salesforce, trying to solution and build for fairly complicated use cases. And then that's where you come in. You're brought in to bring in your fixer. I mean, this guy, he's your fixer. You bring him in when there's a project that really needs help and it's been half finished. And that's when those kind of guys come to play. And they make great money doing it, fixing other people's problems.
Yeah, but it would be better, I guess, if they didn't have to do that all the time. If they really, like I've heard of people in the past that have been hired into a consulting business with no experience and put on a project on their own to do an implementation. Their first day in the role and they're out doing an implementation when they'd never worked in a practical environment. And this is going back a while, like I'm thinking maybe 3 years or so for this particular guy. But now he would never go back into consulting because of the experience he had. This is a personal one. What do you dislike more? Job descriptions or personal brands?
Oh, Jesus Christ. Personal brands. Let me rephrase it. I think it depends on what part of your career you're in. If you're a new admin, new fresh to the world, you don't need a brand. Your hiring manager doesn't know what Salesforce is anyways. They're not out there looking to see how you interact in the community. They just want to see that you're hungry and willing to work. Later in life, if you're a more senior admin, you're trying to establish yourself as a thought leader or a contractor because you're at that point where you're like, hey, I'm done working client side. It's time to move out on my own. A brand becomes more important then. But earlier in the early career, I don't think you need a brand. I don't think it's necessary. That's when I think job descriptions need to be better written. There's so many bad job descriptions out there that there's a fundamental lack of understanding of what an admin does from junior to senior. It doesn't matter. It's across the board. There's a fundamental lack of understanding of what you're expecting from somebody.
And a lot of the time they're copy and paste my view on the personal brand thing, I think like maybe the word personal branding or the words personal branding aren't right for an admin. I think like to show, like I encourage people to post about what they're learning and doing. And I think like, yes, you might get attention. It's not necessarily because you need a personal brand, but it's showing enthusiasm for Salesforce. And like I've seen people post about what they've built and get a job out of it. And that wasn't because they wanted to be, LinkedIn famous or like a Salesforce personality. They just wanted to show that they can do some of the hands-on stuff. And I think that's different to personal branding, but sometimes it's rolled up in that.
Yeah. I think if you're out there and you're showing what you're learning and you're actually approaching it from the perspective of, I am working through this publicly, and this is kind of my accountability platform for it. I think it's different than immediately starting a blog and immediately starting a YouTube channel talking about your journey. Because at that point, you're just trying to, it seems disingenuous from a certain aspect.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. I think, there's always someone under you that maybe one step behind that can learn from you. So even if you don't have a lot of experience, like your YouTube channel might solve a problem, but I think there's a limited runway if you don't have experience of how much content you can create around that. Whereas just documenting what you're learning is probably a good way to go about it, and showing that how your capabilities are growing. Now, finally, RevOps. So I've never really kind of been aware of the RevOps space. I don't know if it's new or emerging. I think the first time I ever heard of it was through yourself. I know what SalesOps is, but RevOps seems to be a bit different. So is it something that people should be starting to be more aware of, or is it something that's kind of been and gone, or what's the kind of curve of RevOps?
I mean, RevOps is growing right now in the space. So RevOps is the idea of you're taking the operational aspect of the individual team, sales ops, marketing ops, customer success, customer service operations oriented, and you're breaking down silos and you're putting them in within one organization within the company. A lot of times you see it reporting into the sales and the CRO side. I think that's an awful idea because those teams tend to support the entire company. They need to be in an operational role, in operational department. So like COO, CFO, something like that. But the way I put it, I think we were talking earlier, the way I put it is all sales ops are RevOps, but not all RevOps are sales ops. It's very much a strategic and analytic role in the world. And it's designed to help further your team's efforts in the customer lifecycle. It's, hey, how can sales ops close deals better? Like, what data do we need? How can we provide that data? Marketing is looking at that same data, but now that they're on the same team, they have the same definition of what that data means and what those results look like. I'm a big fan of separating the management of systems out of RevOps and into its own like business applications, internal systems role, some generic title like that. Because RevOps is hard as it is. It's very strategic. It's very analytical. There's a lot going on in that world, and adding on the administration of multiple go-to-market platforms and tools makes life harder for people. So I like to see that separated out into its own role underneath the COO or the CFO or the CTO. To answer your second question is, should people be aware of it? Definitely. I think we are at that point where it's no longer enough to be a Salesforce admin in the space, in the world. You have to be willing to and or know additional platforms. That sales acceleration, like Outreach and Enablement and Sales Loft, is that commission plan software, like exactly in Captivate IQ. There's a ton of different tools out there, Sales Hood, Showpad, Speckit, Sonar. You have to be able to understand and manage multiple platforms. And that's what they're asking Salesforce admins to do now. It's no longer just the Salesforce tool. It's becoming a much more general IT function.
I've heard of many of those tools that you mentioned, but are a lot of those supported by the company themselves, and it's kind of just an integration into Salesforce, or?
No, so I have my team. We manage Salesforce, NetSuite, Sales Loft, the commission platform, a demo tool. And those, we have probably 60, 70 go-to-market platforms between sales and service that we support. And my team manages the administration of them as well as the integration with Salesforce. So it's not just owning the connection, it's also owning the tool and being able to be a Sales Loft administrator, understand how cadences work and workflows work in Sales Loft, how that integration plays back in and maps to Salesforce. It's becoming just an expectation, and it's no longer a quality that sets you apart from other admins.
So now it's more than just like knowing App Exchange. Like historically, it's like, have you worked with DocuSign? Great. Okay, cool. Yeah, boom, you're in. Now it's a lot broader than the App Exchange.
Yeah, let's look like a DocuSign, right? They acquired Spring CM. Now, do you know DocuSign eSign, or do you know DocuSign CLM with contract lifecycle? And then how have you integrated with that? Like, are you able to set up workflows in CLM? My platform manager on the Salesforce side for my team, he manages DocuSign CLM for us in addition to being a CPQ administrator. That's part of his role and his responsibilities within the company.
Yeah, wow. And on a personal level as well, you're now a published author, I believe.
Yeah, that was awesome. Yeah. It's called Things I've Posted to the Internet. And it's just screenshots of things I posted to the internet. You can get it in 8x11 because I didn't have the time or the patience to make the images smaller to fit on the page. So I made the book larger so I didn't have to mess with the images.
Lovely. I saw. I can't remember who I saw that received a copy, but yeah, it's getting out there.
Yeah, it's great. I'm working on volume 2 right now.
Nice. Well, put me down for a copy.
I got you. I'll send one your way.
Awesome. Well, thanks again. Always a pleasure to catch up. And where do you hang out most these days? Is it Twitter? Is it LinkedIn? Like, where can people find you?
If you want to find me on LinkedIn, it's linkedin.com/in/grumpyadmin. And then Wizards of Ops and Ohana are my 2 big Slack channels that I spend most of my time in. I spend some time on Twitter, but it's mostly because my LinkedIn auto posts to Twitter. Then I'll respond there. But LinkedIn's probably the best place to find me. I think I prefer the long form content of LinkedIn over the short form content of Twitter. And you can ask more direct questions in LinkedIn and maintain the context. Whereas when you're threading on Twitter, you can get lost pretty easily.
Yeah, for sure. And you get dragged across the Twitter because people post ridiculous things about how you become an admin in 2 or 3 weeks. Yeah.
I mean, boot camps kind of suck. So there's some challenges there.
Well, let's end there. So thanks again, mate. Really good to catch up, and always a pleasure.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Talent Hub Talk. If you're enjoying the podcast, we'd love it if you could subscribe and also leave a short review. We're keen for this podcast to reach as many people in the Salesforce ecosystem as possible, and your reviews will help us do that.